I think one of the good way of collaboration is understanding the end-to-end supply chain of the shippers for the forwarders, and then shippers needs to work in a partnership mode rather than uh, purchase mode, because the main failure is the shippers are looking into the transportation as a kind of purchase service, or sometimes they make the same mistake. They give it only for purchasing departments as buying a transport or freight. Is actually is more than that. I mean, because of the shipper has the origin points and their vendors, and then there's a whole ecosystem that needs to be analyzed and then to be integrated for an efficient supply chain. I think it's very critical that the shipper open up this in a transparent way into partnership mode and then bring into table.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Freight to the Point. I'm Lucie Phillips, Zencargo's Chief Operations Officer, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Okyay Oztugran, VP of Supply Chain Europe at Spreetail, one of Zencargo's very valued customers. Spreetail is an e-commerce company specialised in selling a wide range of products through various online platforms, including their own website, as well as Amazon and eBay. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of e-commerce supply chains and how to optimise strategies to work towards business goals. So, welcome, Okyay.
Hi, Lucy. Nice to meet you. Thanks again.
It's so excited to have you on the podcast. So do you want to start? Give a quick introduction to yourself to our listeners.
I'm holding a role VP Supply Chain Europe since 2 years in the Spreetail in the UK office and managing Europe operations from end-to-end supply chains. I'm coming from a career which is more than 20 years in 3PL logistics world, working very different logistics companies from regional to global ones. And in the last 13 years, I hold the C-level roles, either as a CEO or VP in different organizations, and then manage the global trade in container, transportation, trucking, and warehousing and distribution and fulfillment. I had a chance to see a lot of angles of the logistics and then sum up the experiences. Now I'm using these experiences and being on the shipper side of the game and then managing our own logistics.
And clearly got a lot of supply chain experience to bring to the table. So,
yeah.
Well, let's dive in then with a very easy first question. Okay. So, given all of your experience, how would you say the world of e-commerce has evolved over the past few years?
I've been in the e-commerce industry nearly last 4 or 5 years, especially begin from the Germany of a mid-sized company, being the CEO of Germany, and then becoming the Spreetail on a more global perspective. And I was just right in the middle of in the COVID times that we call a kind of pandemic situation. And even before the pandemic, e-commerce has a little bit above average growth rates as an industry compared to the 3PL logistics. And it was always a compound growth rate average between 10 to 15% year on year. But COVID has accelerated it enormously because everybody was sitting at home and then there's nothing to do. And then we all shopped all possible things through online.
We did. Some of us more than others, but yes, we did,
yeah. And then it was easy for us. And then that's why they give a bump to e-commerce industry, nearly becoming a 30% of growth rates that we have seen in the 21 and 22. And that was a little bit misleading because when everybody thought that, now e-commerce is really getting accelerated, and then took an attention from different angles, like the investors and all the companies, even with the 3PL organizations has emerged into area and then saying that, that's a lucrative area, is a high growth area. Why would we are not adding also the e-commerce services? But it requires a different setup and competency base. Now, we've seen in beginning with the 22 and 23, the market is just stabilized. I mean, we're back from the pandemic, and then now we're seeing that the again 10-ish kind of percentage growth rates again in normal pace, and even from the last 2 years when the global environment has changed, and then the war has started in Ukraine, and also the global political situation and the inflationary environment with the high interest rates impacted the customer and consumer behaviors, and then we're seeing that in some months or some seasons, it's really diminishing or being stable. It is volatile. I mean, it's not like a steady growth, but it's a volatile, and depending on the season, there are some even seasonal articles or SKUs that are really selling well due to spatial situations, or some season they're not selling well as you're supposed to be. So it's a kind of volatile VUCA environment now, also in the e-commerce. I think the industry has been stabilized coming from a high inventory levels into a more stabilized inventory levels, and now the supply chain disruptions also globally happening. The longer lead times has also come to with an impact of becoming more shorter and frequent lead times from the inventories. That's what's happening now in the e-commerce market.
And these are obviously creating, challenges for supply chains. I mean, is there
Exactly.
any, I mean, you touched on quite a few there. Do you
Mm.
feel like, I mean, the consumer behavior has changed quite dramatically the after lockdown, or you said that it's stabilized, but do you feel like now there is
Yeah,
more?
I think it's changed. I think it's changed because in the lockdown, there were a lot of items which were not selling well, like the lifestyle outdoor or the home related SKUs or products. Now, when the lockdown was very good and running, but now we're seeing that since the lockdown is back, and then everybody's traveling and then doing different things, and then also the cost of living crisis added a different modality into the buying behaviors. And for example, in the wintertime, people thinking that the gas bills are really super enormous, and then they stop using the gas and then go into kind of old fashioned heating
Oh,
products.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the chimneys and the fire logs, and then maybe even the electrical heating machines, then rather than using the gas. And then that's a kind of substitute items that we're seeing that, oh, why this item is selling too well? I mean, in this winter, middle of winter, because of the cost of living. And then we can relate it to on the cost consumer behaviors is dramatically changed. Now, I think the consumers are really more cautious. They're not spending for the sake of spending. They're just on a need basis and then checking the prices everywhere.
Clearly a lot of
Mhm.
challenges over the past few
Yeah.
years. Then it's been, as you said, I think
Mhm.
volatile was the correct word to use there.
Mhm.
Let's pivot a little, and we've set the scene. Let's talk a bit more about such strategies within supply chain
Sure.
then. So if we're thinking about outbound strategies,
Mhm.
what would you say are the key components of a successful outbound strategy for an e-commerce business? What would you be recommending?
Outbound strategy is still unsolved issue and pain in the e-commerce and last mile deliveries because of the fact that the product dimensions and all the networks are not still one-to-one match. It's due to the fact that, for example, there are strict rules in the Europe, even the UK, like between 0 to 30 kg items running still on the parcel range, and which is like a courier can bring it to the home in a faster or the other modality. But what is about 30 kilo, and which we call a gray zone or two-man handling items, are still, the networks are not mature. In the parcel area, we saw a lot of players in the market that are dominating with their established networks, which then we can offer next day deliveries even in some markets. But if you go to the big and bulky area, which we are playing a little bit intentionally and then targeted way, because it's hard to handle and it's hard to ship. And then since the two-man handling area has been literally done by two men as a courier, it's a different network, it's a different handling. You cannot use the sorting machines in your establishment. So you need to make an appointment, which we call in diary shipments. And you need to call the consumers and then make an appointment for deliveries, which makes it extra difficult. And then the delivery times are not still favorable. So we cannot talk about the next days in this range. Sometimes 3 to 5 days of delivery cycles. And also with different issues like the consumers not at home because they're not committing to their appointments. Sometimes the products are coming back with additional costs. I think those are the challenges in the outbound area. And then in terms of strategy, the e-commerce retailer really needs to look into their business in a SKU level, not as a holistic level, and then make the analysis and use the AI and other algorithms in the engines, which we call shipping rules, because it is not possible if you have running more than 500 SKUs in your portfolio and in the warehouse, and then it's not a manual work. It's the computer or the software needs to decide on the shipping rule if you give the dimensions and weight, and then put on the cost, and then the decision comes with which cost is the optimized in which carrier, and then also thinking about the service level. So like some companies like us is very dominant on Prime, 70% of our business on Amazon Prime. So there's a strict delivery promise of next day, and so we need to meet. In order to meet that, we need to use specific carriers. So there's also a kind of imperative coming from the marketplaces into the customers. So you're bound to use some specific carriers in the outbound.
And how diverse do you keep your outbound carriers? Like, are you going wide, or are you got a few selected that you trust and work with? Especially with Prime, I'm assuming that's very time sensitive. How do you make that choice?
For Prime, definitely there are less options. I mean, the markets, like sometimes at most 2 to 3 carriers are eligible for Prime, and you need to use them, and then you need to create a kind of outbound mix, which we call through the carriers, and then manage your cost versus SKU mix in a intelligent way. And also the capacities, you manage the capacity because of the peak times. For example, if you're running really on high orders, then you have, if you're not planning the capacity and forecast properly, and bet on only one carrier, then it might be exceeding the trailer capacity, and then you cannot ship out the goods, which we call OTS metric, and then you just miss the Prime on the next week. So it's very strict, and you need to make a proper planning, proper outbound capacity planning for your Prime orders to be meeting the promised delivery criteria. But on the other field, you're not too much bound to the Prime, but there's the mix of carriers also playing on those areas. That probably the ideal way is keeping at most 4 to 5 carriers in your portfolio, not to differentiate too much, because then you won't have the buying power, because you split the volumes. And then if you're not committing to your volume commitments, then your charge will be higher in the next year. So there's a kind of nice mix, and then nice concentration, and rely on the carrier mix so that everybody will be happy with the business and the win-win situation.
You touched earlier on, the difference between sort of the larger two-man delivery and then those under 30 kg. I'm interested to know a bit more about Spreetail's strategy, because I know that you guys have found a way to balance speedy deliveries with cost efficiency. Can you talk just a little bit more about what you've done there, and the advice you would give?
Our selling proposition always from our mother company from the US from the beginning, always faster deliveries. I mean, we're making brands successful in the marketplaces with the faster delivery options to their consumers that are making shopping through the marketplaces. And that's why we are very much committed to offer, if possible, the next day or fastest delivery as possible. We've seen that, I mean, this range is only possible in the Europe terms, is between 0 to 30 kg parcel area. And that's why we are keeping our promises to our customers, mostly the free delivery and then next day delivery, more than 80%, is sometimes going to 90% levels in different markets. And to commit the fastest delivery option as possible for the consumers. If the customers are buying the out of range product, like going over 30 kg, then the promised delivery will be shown to the consumers, definitely, I mean, is the earliest possible. So because we can, I mean, if our carrier telling us that, hey, in the UK, I can bring this product 50 kg to a consumer within 2 to 3 days, then we're committing 2 to 3 days. So we're giving this back to back. So we're not over promising, we're not under promising. It's a balance that we're trying to keeping for this big and bulk items, which is especially in the two-man handling terms, and which we believe that we are using the best carriers in the market as possible, so that the consumer experience and also the promised delivery are met. That's our strategy.
And then with the ever-growing focus on sustainability, how are you incorporating environmentally friendly practices into supply chain strategy, especially when you've got this pressure to meet that customer demand with deliveries? How do you balance the two?
As a company, we are aware of the ESG strategies, and we are very keen on following them as possible as we can. But due to the nature of our business, I mean, we're dealing with sold products online, is always with the boxes and cartons. I mean, they're packed, and sometimes there are some products that we pack ourselves, even to make a safe delivery to our customers. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to keep the extra pack items as low as possible and try to go to manufacturing packing, because that's the least we can offer. And then what we're doing in the markets that we're selling, we are subscribing into package recycling programs, and we're really paying the fees and then contributing into the system, so that environmental impacts in the markets that we are selling, for example, in Germany, is very strictly followed, and then you need to be registered into a portal as a online retailer, and then you need to submit your number of volumes or cartons you're injecting into the system. That's why we're doing it in a very diligent and compliant way. We're not cheating any system, so that's why we're making it visible, following the compliance procedures in the markets, and we're trying to select as many packed items as possible with the original packagings, and then so that our efforts are impacting less the environment. But on the other transportation side, unfortunately, it's not under our control, because we're working with service providers. And I know that in the urban cities, urban deliveries, now there's a strong initiatives going with the electric vehicles, and the deliveries is done by the electric vehicles. When our service providers are making urban deliveries to the cities, then we're trying to understand what their delivery modalities like, how they're using it, but we cannot make them liable or enforce them to use we can only use the electric vehicle companies. That's why it's not in our hands. We're just giving the parcels to be delivered, but it's been, we're trying to use as much as the established companies who are also dealing with strong ESG strategies on the background. That's what I can tell.
Where you can control it, you're trying
Exactly.
as much to incorporate it into your strategy. And then I think that will evolve as well, because as you say, more and more of these companies are starting to use green vehicles. So over time, in theory, it should start to align. Okay, well, let's change tack a bit, and let's talk a bit more about then, visibility, which, if we're talking about, you're working with all these third parties. It's not just e-commerce that faces this problem in terms of having loads of different parties, different suppliers within the supply chain. So how does visibility, from all of your experience, how does that help you keep an eye on the prize? How are you helping, how is visibility helping you keep an eye on how suppliers are doing?
Tracing and the visibility of the shipments is a very big subject now, especially came up very strongly in the pandemic time, because everybody was trying to follow up their shipments and the assets and everything, especially in the supply chain. And the new developments and the emerging companies, like yourself, like the traditional forwarders are becoming the digital forwarders, and then having a software-based developed establishments, and then started tracking the containers around the globe, and then from the origin points until the end, and then provide this visibility. I can see the containers. Where is my container on the water, and then when it will arrive. And I think the visibility is the two aspects. One of them is the very big aspect for the shipper or receiver is the predictive ETA. I think that's the most important piece. And then to make a better planning other than unknown future. That's the part that the providing transparent and visibility of this track of shipments is disrupted the industry of having only a company who's working traditional way and can only provide what the information they want to provide to their shippers. I think that's break it down as and disrupt it with the new emerging digital forwarders, new emerging RTV platforms like Project 44 or Shippers of the world. And what they're doing is adding value into the value chain, is that from the transport from end to end, then enabling us to track our shipments, even let it be the container or a truck, then we know exactly when it's coming, where is now, and then in which process is now. So that was not so much visible in the 5 years ago, but the developments in the digitalization of the logistics industry helped a lot, especially the software and SIS platforms, and helped to give this visibility, and then the industry is emerging now.
And in order to, this sort of technology like Zencargo, I mean, in order to get it to work for you, obviously it relies heavily on data. And if you're working with so many different suppliers, what advice would you be giving to those listening about how to get started, really? Because pulling that together, getting that quality integrity of data into play, it really helps. So what advice would you be giving to people who are thinking about going down this path to improve their visibility?
I think it's begin from the customer perspective as a shipper or the owner of the transport. I would say they should now freely request from his service providers. I mean, like, is everybody evolving now on this, having a kind of visibility? Some has a really decent high level of visibility, some has a primitive levels, but at least there's a visibility that can be provided transparently. And this needs to be repeatedly requested and become a subject in the tenders as well. Like, I mean, in a transport request, hey, how I can visualize or track my shipment. And then the service provider needs to able to answer this question by either its own software or the other platforms that they are using as a service provider for themselves, and saying with confidently, here's the shipment, here's how you place your order, and then this is how we're gonna provide you the visibility so that you will get instant emails, you'll get the map locations or whatever the platform or tech they are using. But this should be requested from the shipper side and then embedded into the processes. And then the other piece is if the company is small, then it could be a kind of person keeping track of it. But if the more users involved, then the high level or the end level version of it, just to integrating the TMSs. I mean, if you have a big system like SAP or big TMS, then you can easily integrate through the visibility and make it visible for the other departments in your company, so that the warehouse can plan the shipment when they can receive it. They can see the exceptions, they can see the whatever the change of plans, or even change their sales and the availability in the market, because maybe this product is becoming late, so that your launch is late, and you need to change something in your sales strategy.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Unfortunately, we have to start wrapping up. We've covered so much in the short time together, looking at how the e-commerce market has changed and the volatility, strategies to try and tackle that, and going deeper into visibility and how that can really help a business tackle some of those challenges. My final question for you today then is, how would you recommend businesses collaborate with freight forwarders like ourselves or partners on these strategies to get the most out of that partnership with those freight forwarders to ensure success?
One of the good way of collaboration is understanding the end-to-end supply chain of the shippers for the forwarders, and then shippers needs to work in a partnership mode rather than purchase mode, because the main failure is the shippers are looking into the transportation as a kind of purchase service, or sometimes they make the same mistake. They give it only for purchasing departments as buying a transport or freight. It actually is more than that. I mean, because of the shipper has the origin points and their vendors, and then there's a whole ecosystem that needs to be analyzed and then to be integrated for an efficient supply chain. I think it's very critical that the shipper open up this in a transparent way into partnership mode, and then bring into the table, here's my partners, here's the origin points that I'm buying the goods, and then can you analyze my supply chain and then offer me the best option, not only cost, but the way of working, like the procedures changes, or the way the documentation flow, or how to make a total logistics cost better with the improved service. I think that's the mentality that shippers needs to have, rather than having only one service provider only for end-to-end.
Well, unfortunately, we have run out of time, but thank you so much, Okyay. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you and seeing you again. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Lucie. I really appreciate the time.
And thank you so much to our listeners for joining us for yet another episode of Freight to the Point. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our series on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts if you enjoyed this episode. And if you do have any questions or feedback at all, please feel free to reach out to the Zencargo team on LinkedIn. We would absolutely love to hear from you. So until next time, thank you very much. Goodbye.